Recent analysis of Bureau of Labor Statistics research by the National Association of Home Builders estimates that the construction employment needs to increase by about 740,000 per year just to keep up with residential and commercial demand. But nearly every month, the construction industry itself reports between 300,000 and 400,000 unfilled positions. How and where will the industry find and train the 2.2 million workers it will need over the next 3 years, especially once the recently passed infrastructure plan kicks in? Joining us today to discuss how this worker gap might be filled safely is Joe Schloesser, Senior Director of ISN, a global contractor management firm. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, welcome. Thanks, John.
Joe, let's start our conversation by talking about the current state of the construction workforce. Do you see any signs out there that give you hope that the industry will be able to meet demand in the coming years?
Yeah, I think it's certainly an uphill climb, John. I think some of the statistics you mentioned earlier certainly are challenging, but I think with any industry, you learn to fight through these types of obstacles, and you have to find a way to survive. And I think one of the things I saw recently through a survey done by the AGC, Association of General Contractors, was a lot of firms are looking at increasing wages as a way to train and to attract and to retain employers. And I think obviously retaining is a huge element of it, because if you have lots of turnover, which construction industry historically has seen, that can only make productivity even that much harder. I think some of the things that I've seen that have been encouraging is certainly like thinking about the labor pools in different ways. So how do we attract this new generation of labor pools through things like social media, or looking at maybe historically underrepresented labor groups like women, or potentially immigration into the country. And then also you could look at things like former inmate programs and those types of things that could drive new workforce. But I think one of the things that that's probably most encouraging in the near term is what technology could do. So the ability to work on scheduling and optimization and digitization, and this is areas that historically construction has not met the other industry benchmarks as far as improving productivity, and there's certainly an area that they can improve there. And then maybe final point would just be on the workforce development front. There's lots of efforts. I'm sure you've seen these over the years within construction on how nonprofits and NGOs and the government are working on that. But there's just a room for a lot of investment here, particularly with this infrastructure bill, where the government can do a lot more in developing and pushing funds towards trades and trade education to help build that next generation of workers.
Mm-hmm. Contractors and their clients are understandably rushing to onboard and train just to hire workers that they need. But how should they be doing this safely? How do you do this and maintain safety as being paramount to your process?
Yeah, I think it starts with having an organization that has a strong safety culture, because that is what's going to be your defense, because really safety culture is defined as how the work is getting done in the field. So you need this strong safety culture to mitigate some of those challenges. We have new employees. But some of the more practical things, we talk a little bit about building a safety culture, but some of the more practical things would be making sure you have a clear matrix of what trainings and requirements you have for skills, depending on what the work is being done, and then having a good policy or approach to apprenticeship or observations or some kind of span of control. So if somebody's taken on a job that's hazardous or risky and they have less experience, that they have somebody there to kind of support them and manage through that in the field.
Joe, is there a methodology to setting up a work environment that's transparent in its job site safety?
Yeah, I'd say, I think, you want to have policies and procedures that make sure you understand the work you're doing and how that's performed. And then having tools and workflows and checklists that go into the job planning. And that obviously will allow the workers to give some feedback within the job site and be able to improve things. So if they see things that are being done that aren't safe, they can manage to report that through that.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific protocols and policies that your firm sort of advocates and recommends?
Yeah. Well, we have, I think obviously you want to have, a type of environment or company culture that has a strong reporting culture. We actually, one of the things that I worked on is the development of a safety culture assessment for organizations. And we do this for job sites, projects across global enterprises. And we do it even for the small firms, small contracting firms that have smaller entities. And the thing we hear time and time again is that where you have a breakdown in safety performance comes from employees not owning their own safety, not feeling like if they report something that it's going to be acted upon. You also want leadership and supervisors to engage and respond to that as quick as possible, and also to engage the workers in the development of what you're going to do to improve that or make it better. So if you have those kinds of elements, that certainly leads to results, and we would advocate that all organizations kind of incorporate those types of philosophies in their programs.
Have you found that it becomes less or more complicated to inject safety into the process when the company gets larger or smaller? I mean, is there a size relationship here to conducting safety in an expeditious way?
Yeah, I think that they both have unique challenges. Certainly, smaller organizations tend to have less resources, but you have maybe a tendency to have more experienced workers or a little bit more familiarity with the work, which also can create complacency and safety issues. You have a larger organization, you have a bigger, business to run, a bigger operation, and you also probably have a higher likelihood of subcontracting work, which creates some other challenges there. So I think they both have unique challenges that need to be managed. Probably the one on the smaller company side is just making sure you have the right resources and tools to operate as safe as possible, is something that's unique to them.
Speaking of tools, you mentioned earlier about the role that technology is playing. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of how technology can enhance a workplace environment's safety protocols?
Yeah. A lot of the job sites that we see or hear about, or a lot of environments, are still paper-based as far as how they handle processes and checklists, those types of things, which are okay as far as making it something that you can bring to the field and that's always there. I mean, certainly technology has challenges if it doesn't work, or connection and that type of thing. But where the opportunity is they're really not learning anything from a lot of these paper-based processes or checklists. So if, a lot of high-risk work is done with a job hazard analysis or a work permitting system. And so all of that information from that work that's being performed and who's doing it is lost. And so having technology be able to understand and gain insights from some of the work that's being performed is probably the only way that construction is really going to start driving productivity increases, similar to what we've seen in manufacturing processes, where you have a heavy amount of data and lots of oversight in the process. I think that's one piece of it. I'd say training has certainly got an area of opportunity. So we've seen things like augmented reality or virtual reality training. So you don't have to be on the job to necessarily simulate the work practices. Even within our own business, just being able to do remote learning for like site induction or site training, and having the worker be able to do that in advance of showing up and doing it while they're rushing to get on a job. Those kinds of little things have, I think, led to a lot better safety improvement, safety performance.
Mm. You said in the past that safety must be prioritized over productivity and onboarding. But, how does that resonate with companies that are, always behind the eight ball in terms of getting their projects done on time and on budget? I guess what I'm asking here is safety and productivity, can it be inclusive?
Yeah, I think that they can be, John. I think actually they're synonymous, because you can't have a productive site with an unsafe site, because safety is very costly. Lack of good safety performance is very costly, and it's unproductive. You need to have those two together. Also, if you think about attracting and retaining workers that have the experience and knowledge to do the work,
Yep.
they want to work in a safe environment. So to the extent that they don't, that you're not performing, have a high safety performance or high safety culture, you're not going to have the workers that lead to better productivity. So maybe in the short term, you can push a little bit harder, that work harder mentality, but it will catch up to you very fast, especially in these high risk environments. So over even the course of a large capital project, if you have the right safety focus, you're going to lead to better productivity. And it just takes leadership to understand and see that. And I think, frankly, most people in the industry are aware of that trap.
That was going to be my last question. What grade would you give the industry right now in terms of job site safety?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know if I'm in the best position to do that. But I'd say, I think it varies. I'd say like in more high risk. So we have more experience in industrial settings, so super high risk work sites like chemical facilities and oil and gas, that type of thing. Some of that's heavily regulated. I would say that generally it's a very high grade. You know, I think that we've seen continued improvement. Now there's certainly things that concern you around serious incidents that aren't trending in the same direction as just normal incident rates. But on the residential side, that's where I'd probably say is that it's probably a little bit less sophistication, particularly because I think some of the labor challenges that you see are exacerbated in those industries. And you have a lot more subcontractors and a little bit more loose control of the owner or asset. So I'd say that, you know, it varies by the degree of complexity in the industry.
Mhm. I just did a story about a company that was doing an historic preservation, and they had cornices that needed to be replaced, but the only way they were able to spot them was by using drone technology. So, which they would
Mhm.
have never done in the past. I mean, so to your point, I mean, there are ways that job site safety is being improved on a variety of levels.
Yeah, it's a good example because, you know, if you look at the hierarchy of safety controls, the number one way to control for a safety issue is to remove the issue altogether, right? So if the work's never performed, you risk. And so to the extent technology can do that, that also supplements some of your labor challenges too, right? It's just not, construction has just historically been struggling with eliminating job work with technology, but there's certainly opportunity. Drones are a great example of ways to survey things or observe stuff.
Mhm. Joe, thanks for taking a couple minutes to speak with us about this.
Yeah, my pleasure, John. Thank you for having us.
And thanks our audience for joining us. This is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction Magazine.